Now that we've had a child in Germany, are we going to stay here for him to go into the German education system or go back to the States for American schools? Hey guys, and welcome back to our channel. I am Donnie, and along with my wife Aubrey, we are two Americans currently living in Germany with our baby, sharing all of our experiences living and traveling throughout Europe. We originally moved to Germany from the US 4 years ago with the intention of living here for just 1 year and having a little adventure abroad. Well, 1 year became another year, and then another year, and another year, and now we've been here for 4 years, and we've now had a baby in Germany, and where before we never considered too many differences about German and American schools because we never thought it would play a role in our lives personally, we now suddenly are taking a closer look at the two education systems and how they might affect our own children. And that's exactly what I'm going to talk about today in my video. We don't need no education. But what about repatriation? One day I was walking with a friend in town and we walked past one of our town schools. As we walked by, I looked in the window and saw children shooting their hands in the air, I'm assuming to ask a question, and it looked fairly similar to scenes I'm used to in the US, but one key difference. Apparently, when German children ask questions in class, they raise an index finger to get the attention of the teacher. In the US, children would just raise their hand to get a teacher's attention with all fingers extended. But I want all of your take on this because, for example, when I look up Kinder im Klassenzimmer, I mostly get results of children raising one finger, but then there are a few where it is a whole hand raised like I would expect to see in the US. So is one finger something German children are specifically taught to do? Also, I tried to look up a reason for this difference and I can't find a good answer. Of course, one might assume the same thing as my first thought, which is that this is to avoid confusion with a Nazi salute, but I can't find anything that is actually confirming this, and to be honest, maybe there isn't a good reason this difference exists, but it is an interesting difference nonetheless. American English has adopted a lot of German words, but then we go and completely change the meaning of the original German word, and one can get quite confused when they see the same word in both countries, but they don't mean the same thing. One of those is definitely the word kindergarten. Just like kindergarten, or the other way around, for example, how German adopts English words like handy, but handy in Germany does not mean what handy means in the US, is a great reason for someone to brush up their language skills using italki. This video has been sponsored by italki. italki offers personalized one-on-one lessons in over 150 languages with professional teachers that requires no subscription because you just pay per class. With italki, you simply find a teacher that fits your schedule, tell them what you want to learn, and you get customized lessons plans specific to your goals. In fact, I am signed up for a C1 German exam in December, so I took an italki class to help get prepared, and this is how it went.
Aber was ist Genitiv? Genitiv, wenn du den Namen Genitiv hörst, gibt es eine Assoziation bei dir?
Wenn etwas gehört zu jemand.
Genau.
This lesson was amazing because it was with a native speaker who was able to give me immediate feedback. So I was actually getting real cultural immersion with italki's qualified teacher, which is a huge bonus. So that you can try them out, if you use our link and special code PASSPORT2, italki will be giving you a special buy €10 and get €5 off deal to help you get going at finally achieving your language goals. In the US, when you start elementary school, it is a little bit confusing because the first grade in school is not really the first grade in much of the US, but rather kindergarten is. Kindergarten is literally a grade in an American elementary school building, and after a child completes 1 school year of kindergarten, then they go to the first grade. Part of the reason for this confusing setup is because in most of the US, kindergarten isn't actually required for children to attend, unlike in other states where kindergarten is required. Generally speaking, at 5 years old, children are first eligible to go to kindergarten, and first grade will start at 6. And because it is part of the school system, it doesn't generally have any extra cost to parents unless they are, of course, sending their children to, say, a private school or something. In comparison, kindergarten in Germany is not a part of the school system at all, and it is also not a 1 year thing like it is in the US. Instead, kindergarten in Germany would basically be what Americans call preschool. Preschool in the US is usually at a cost to parents, and children can go starting at generally from 2.5. In Germany, it will vary across the country, but generally children from 3 to 7 years old can go to kindergarten for free. The rates at which children in Germany and the US start a kindergarten or a preschool are also very interesting. In Germany, 92% of children 3 to 6 attend kindergarten. Since Americans have preschool and kindergarten in the same age range as German kindergarten, we can look at data and see that only 50% of American 3 to 4-year-olds are enrolled in some sort of preschool, but 86% of 5-year-olds are enrolled in school. To be honest, although they are somewhat different things, the function of kindergartens in the US and in Germany is basically the same. They provide children with the ability to learn to socialize and eventually get prepared for when they do go to school by laying a foundation in the basics of language, literacy, or thinking skills. Let me just quickly say, as we have been learning about German and American schools, there are an insane amount of differences between the two systems, meaning it would be impossible for me to talk about all of the differences in this one video. This is made even more true because even within Germany and within the US, there are differences in the schools from state to state, or sometimes even district to district. So because this video is more generally about our personal experiences with the differences between where we are originally from in a southern US state called Oklahoma and where we live now in the southwestern German state of Rheinland-Pfalz, feel free to leave other differences you know of and let me know your personal experiences with the two systems in the comments below. As you might expect with the differences between how kindergarten is part of the American school system, whereas in Germany it is not, there are definitely differences in how schools are structured between these two countries. And this is a huge difference between the two and is a huge thing we are taking into consideration with where we would want our children to go to school. When American schools are being talked about, you will often hear the term K through 12 thrown around, which encompasses all of the grades of the American education system. Very generally speaking, you typically have 3 different schools that everybody progresses through from K through the 12th grade. Elementary schools usually contains K, kindergarten through 5th grade, middle schools will have 6th grade through 8th grade, and high schools will have 9th grade through the 12th grade, which would be the final year for everybody who makes it through and graduates school. Okay, so obviously I'm leaving out all the exceptions to this most common framework, but now let me explain what is to me the much more complicated German system as simply as I can. As we've discussed, kindergarten is not involved with the school, so the first grade children start in is, well, the first grade. German efficiency. Children start in a Grundschule, which will have the 1st through 4th grades. Now, in the 4th grade, this is where it gets interesting. Children will take an exam that will determine the future of their schooling because unlike in the US, not everybody is generally on the same trajectory or will go through the same amount of years of schooling. One path is Hauptschule, which this school will end after the 9th grade. Another path is Realschule, which will end after the 10th grade. And then there is Gymnasium, which will end in the 12th or 13th grade, which for us used to the American school system is wild to think that there are some children whose schooling will be cut years shorter than other children's. However, generally after Hauptschule or Realschule, these students will then go on to do apprenticeships or vocational training, so they aren't really done with learning, they just are done with what we think of as typical school. But typically and generally speaking, the students from Gymnasium are going to be the ones that go on to universities afterwards. So, our American perspective on this very different schooling system, at first, I will be honest and say that we looked at this and had the following questions. 1, does this not put insane pressure on tiny 9-year-olds who take exams that determine, generally speaking, whether or not they go to university and the path of their lives going forward? Also, 2, does this not create a class system in society because it seemed like they are dividing up people based on intelligence? To be honest, this system initially just seemed to be so limiting to one's options and to be frank, kind of cruel that we didn't have a super open mind towards it initially. However, over time, I have learned to look at it a little differently and see some of the benefits, although to be honest, I'm still not sure that I'm entirely convinced. So for example, 1, Germans don't seem to look at it as dividing students by intelligence. intelligence per se, but rather aptitude. I think we all know there are just some people who are more apt to sciences or just academics in general, and some who are more apt towards trades. Therefore, they say, let's not waste your time teaching you things you won't need to know based on what you are good at and should probably do. To which I say, fair enough, maybe. Two, where in the US, everybody follows the same general trajectory that should get you to the education level that you need, with the idea being that you can then do anything you want based on your performance. However, to some extent, everybody is taught to some degree of a common denominator because you will have various levels of abilities taking the same classes. Therefore, there's an idea that you are holding back higher achievers as you may not teach as fast as they could handle, because you have to make sure that those that may not be as apt to those subjects need things done a little slower. Now, in the US, they do have advanced placement classes to try and help with this problem to some extent, where children are split into different levels of difficulties in the same subject. But in the German system, since everybody is split into different schools, this allows some students to not slow down other students because like aptitudes are paired with like aptitudes, which again, I say that may have a fair point as well. This is a subject that we keep looking more and more into, and again is actually so much more complicated, and I am leaving out a lot of other possibilities inside of Germany and the US for sake of simplification in this video, but I would be interested to hear all of especially our German audience's views and experiences with this system. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, schools can be a very complicated and involved subject, especially if we were to start looking at the differences between public schools, private schools, charter schools, and one of the most notorious, homeschools. School politics is a very sticky subject in the US as people fight over what schools should or shouldn't be teaching, or any other number of political or social issues. Therefore, one popular growing option in the US is homeschooling, which is why it might surprise Americans like it has surprised us that in Germany, homeschooling is actually illegal and not an option for German families. So by homeschooling, I generally mean that children stay at their house and are taught by the parents some sort of educational curriculum. And when I say that homeschooling is a popular option, we need to actually consider the data to see how popular it actually is. In the spring of 2022, only 5.22% of all school-age children were homeschooled, which comes out to roughly 4.3 million children. But from 2016 to 2021, homeschooling has had a compound annual growth rate of 10.1%. In the past, unfortunately, homeschooled children sometimes would have a label of being socially awkward because of the fact that they weren't out learning how to socialize, as other children did in other schooling forms like public schools, for example. However, today, homeschoolers actually have lots of extracurricular activity options that help in that aspect, so those stereotypes and problems with socializing are definitely diminishing. Now, Germans might also be saying that even though technically, for example, Oklahoma doesn't require children to be taught by a certified teacher, that the education must be lacking for homeschoolers. But actually, data shows that homeschoolers typically score 15 to 25 percentile points higher on standardized academic achievement tests compared with kids educated in public schools. So because in the US this was always technically an option we were aware of, whether or not we've actually considered it doesn't matter. For us, it was just surprising to learn that this absolutely is not an option in Germany, because it has been illegal since 1919, as obligatory schooling has been part of German law since then. We don't have to worry about this for a while with our children. Well, except I guess in the US, we don't have to worry about it for a lot longer than children in Germany who determine if they are on the university track in the 4th grade. But one thing that just recently hit me is how long it takes to get a bachelor's in Germany versus how long it takes to get a bachelor's degree in the US. When we first moved here, I remember meeting different Germans talking about who we were, what we do, etc. And as the Germans would be giving their backstory, their timeline just never lined up for me. They would talk about leaving the equivalent of high school in Germany, if you will, go to university, and then 3 years later, start working. In my mind, and based off of my experiences, I couldn't figure out if they didn't finish their degrees, or maybe they were super brilliant and finished it early, because in the US, you generally always have to take 4 years as a full-time student to complete a bachelor's degree. Or one can do a 2-year associate's degree, which generally is sometimes not as viewed as prestigious, I guess you could say, as a 4-year degree, unfortunately, which is the reason that it also led me to think that maybe these German degrees were lesser than a 4-year American degree? I just had no concept for what they were talking about based on the US standards. So let's look a little closer at the American system. In the US, you pick a major or the subject that you are focusing on studying. For example, engineering. But generally, the first 2 years are going to be more general classes with a few major specific classes sprinkled in. These general classes are known as core curriculum, and nearly every university or state will have a different set of core curriculum that all students, regardless of what degree they want to get, must learn. For some universities, their students will be required to take a few foreign language classes. For some, it will be at least one art class, American history, political science, physical education, or any other sort of subject they determine important. This is supposed to give students a more well-rounded education, which I can understand, but I also grapple a little with the fact that we have to pay on average over $10,000 per year for in-state tuition to study a specific subject, but I took, for example, a badminton class and a skiing class as well. So is part of this 4-year degree system a setup to keep you there longer to make you pay more and they can make more money? Or truly to produce well-rounded graduates, I sometimes have to ask myself. Now, that is the general length it takes to finish a bachelor's in the US, but one can take longer if they change their mind about what they want to study multiple times, or even shorter amounts of times if they take a heavier course load than normal, or if they take a lot of college credits while they are in high school even. Which is exactly why I thought when I heard Germans completed their bachelor's in 3 years that maybe they were brilliant or extremely dedicated and finished in 3 years rather than 4. However, I have now learned the norm is 3 years, and my suspicion is that it is because German degree plans don't have as much core curriculum classes requiring students to take classes that don't apply to their chosen degree. Now, I talked with some of my German friends who graduated from uni, and it seems this may be the case, but for some, they still did take at least a few of these types of unrelated classes for their degree. But can any of you confirm or say this belief is false in the comments? In German university, did you have to take any ridiculous classes that weren't applicable to your studies? To see who made it this far into the video, the random question of the week is body wash or a bar of soap? Which do you prefer to shower with? Thanks so much for watching, guys. Be sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons, and I will see you in my next video. Right then, because of how, gosh, I got so many itches and scratches and... But for some, they still did take at least a few of these types of... I accidentally threw up a little bit in my mouth. Ugh.